Hello. Hey, so we got a really good episode today. I am not Joey for some reason. I guess he was up here last episode, so I'll get that changed. But in the meantime, Wade, I am your host for today, and this is Jay, my co-host, and we're going to be talking about some mad science. So we got John here. Yeah, there we go. Resident Mad Science. How you doing?
I'm completely sane.
Indeed, you are.
I think that helps to have a clear mind.
All right. Well, so John is a punny guy, and we had some gags in mind. Guarantee you're gonna have fun at the very least with a lot of the groaners he's gonna dish. But we do have this video of some of the stuff that you've done, and you know, I'd like to add that right now.
Number one incoming.
Oh, wow.
Well,
2, 1.
Oh my God.
What? Oh yeah. Right. So you recently were in well, actually a lot of places. I know, like basically all of Southeast Asia. So you used to be the exec for the Ohio chapter, and then you went on this tour right here. Could you tell us about what you're up to there?
Well, some personal stuff that brought me out of Ohio, but the short version is that largely to further some of my own research projects and a few endeavors on a bit more of a serious note, sadly.
Okay, all right. Are we gonna do the whole time?
But
Fantastic.
moving into a more serious mindset, a lot of what I do is basically a combination of biomedical engineering, a very interdisciplinary field. Essentially, my doctorate is on converting brain signals to external device controls. It could be as simple as wearing a headset that allows you to read electrodes on your scalp and convert those into, say, simulated keystrokes, or essentially detecting drowsiness in pilots or truck drivers. So a lot of it is basically wearable devices and making more robust materials for those ends. Like the experiments you saw with the impact from the potato cannon was testing new composites for protective headwear, which is now commercialized, shall we say, and patented.
Yeah. So you have some. You got a lot of inventions. We've talked. We know each other. We've talked at length about a lot of stuff. Actually, you just came to our chapter from Ohio after you came back, and we have a bunch of different things that we're planning to do. But one of the things that you have that is currently, I guess, one of the chapter enterprises, right? Is that aerogel stuff?
Yep. Otherwise, it's a real headache.
So explain the aerogel. Like, what did you what is that? What is the product, and how does it help?
Aerogel is a material that's actually been known for decades. It's in its base form, it can be fragile, at least the earlier ones, but essentially it acts as a darn good insulator, both thermally and electrically, and essentially can help lighten the load. It was originally designed for aerospace, so a good insulation for aircraft or spacecraft to keep heat from escaping and help manage a lot of things. It's also used in pipelines to help keep the gas or the oil at certain temperatures. So part of the reason for my trip was basically to meet up with potential manufacturers of different aerogel types. It can be made from silica or inorganic stuff, or even from farm waste of different types. So the aerogel making process, there's many steps depending on the type. It can be as complex as a very as multi-step convoluted industrial machinery, or as simple as combustion in some cases, though the quality and consistency is the big manufacturing variability.
And so what does it do specifically? Like, because I know that you created that. Well, it's the aerogel that you put a cornstarch or something in the inside of it, and there's like, just explain what like.
Sure. It's a kind of composite that absorbs impact and dissipates the force. Pressure is equal to force over area. So if a dropped object hits a worker, for instance, the hard hat might still convey some of the shock through the worker. So in our product, or at least some of the cases we basically dissipate the force by using a nice soft material as a liner. Our original use case was martial arts and boxing. A student I had worked with had a concussion because he was a very well-trained boxer, but he suffered a concussion, and it's a miracle he survived some of the complications afterwards. He had less than 10% chance of survival because of that concussion he got during training. So by improving better headgear for athletes from combat sports to workers at a construction site, concussions and traumatic brain injuries are the cause of a lot of unpleasant things. Up to a third of the American population may suffer from a TBI, traumatic brain injury. So they're making a lighter, more affordable headgear, something that you can barely notice, something that also can help keep you cool on a hot day or warm on a cold day. That basically has added bonus there. So ours is basically an aftermarket helmet liner compatible with existing hard hats. And it also can be used for everything from building insulation. We also have an ability to self-power with onboard sensors to detect moisture damage for buildings and impacts of different types, as well as useful for a tool attachment or coating for all sorts of industrial materials.
Now, I read the paper on this particular, I guess, invention of yours, and I think it was like 70% of the impact is going to like completely absorbed by it.
Yes, that was what we found during testing. We made a system called a ballistic pendulum. It's how they measured velocity before cameras, rather. Essentially, they'd fire a projectile at a wooden block and see how much it would swing up by looking at how much it would move a piece of chalk on a board behind it. In our case, we kind of did an updated version of that, hanging a pendulum, a model human head with some of the composite headgear with and without it, and a couple of different variants, and is seeing how much it would swing up by using a computer vision from a cell phone camera. Fairly straightforward, but our testing sadly had a lot of variability because we kept getting crosswinds that would blow stuff off. But overall, it was reliable enough to help dissipate force consistently.
So it's a great invention. I'm not like you're trying to plug it. I'm just like it's so one. This is applied theory, right? So the things that we work on here in the ACP are oftentimes things that either in some way, shape, or form help the worker, and in our case, it's one of those things. If we can do both, benefit people who are improve workplace safety, or improve reduce heat injuries, things like that. These are the kind of things that we do pursue. And the other part is we are 100% dedicated to moving this towards dual power. So yeah, we'll create an invention, and this guy has got like hundreds of, by the way, just so everyone knows. This is like the one thing that he's got out, but we're working on a few other things actually here in New Jersey. But the other thing is, we're focused on dual power and how these things affect dual power. Now, New Jersey currently is, as everybody knows, is working on this syntropic circle farming project. And while that's going to take some time, one of the other parts about that is we're trying to create systems that are going to create secondary grids so that farmers, workers, people can basically afford the electricity. And currently in New Jersey, we've got a lot of data centers, right? And the data centers, look, I'm looking at my electric bill. It's gone up. It's actually kind of excruciating, the amount of power, the amount that we're paying for power. And, if I were going to run a farm, on top of all that, it's gonna, seriously put a dent, in the pocket. So one of the things that we've been talking about and we've been looking into is, and this is, I think, essential to dual power specifically, is secondary grid options, things like electricity generation, and the kind of infrastructure that you can have.
It's quite shocking.
Knew the puns were coming. So one of the things now, this is not something we're going to do immediately. It is obviously we haven't even got the money yet for prototyping. But I've been interested in, and John has been assisting with, is devising a way to get instead of solar power, solar thermal collection, and using that as a HVAC system, so that instead of spending all the power you have on heat pumps and the electricity and all that stuff that goes into basically keeping us from dying in the middle of like wet bulb heat type situations, and also warming the home when necessary. We got there's a hybrid system that we're trying to create here with that can also use a thermal battery, or thermal storage to then power an engine, or the electricity generating engine. Now that's a long way away, but we do have something else, and we were just talking about this earlier today with now you said there was actually, you know what, I'm gonna let you explain it. It's basically a wood stove, but there's something that generates electricity with it.
Yes, a thermoelectric generator. So essentially, it uses things like the Seebeck effect, or Peltier, if you know him, basically to generate small amounts of energy per tile or per device from a heat source. Anywhere you have a change in temperature, a delta T, that can be used as an electrical source. Now, the issue is that thermoelectric generators have been in development for a long time. You can even buy them commercially, but they're not up to the scale of production that, say, solar cells are. Photovoltaics and solar cells have been produced for a very long time, But the Seebeck effect often requires custom fitting on existing heat sources. Like even an old-fashioned wood stove could be a potential heat source, or it could also be used with a gas generator or something like that, just by extending a pipe or a heat source. You could complement it by clever placement of things like insulation. You even could put them on the back or mount them on regular photovoltaics. But at the end of the day, it's still more of a supplemental power source for energy scavenging than something that you can run your house on entirely.
Right, but look, everything counts. The other part is, the expense, right? So those aren't terribly expensive, right? Those
Thermoelectric generators?
thermoelectric generators.
Yeah. The cost is an issue. Plus, some types use rare earths like bismuth, telluride, but also you have to manually wire the things, connect them to some kind of energy harvesting system like a battery bank or energy storage. So there is also many types of combined heat and power, CHP as it's known in home electronics. But using that as a baseline or gradually building it up, that takes time to move from the experimental to the practical. Engineering is all about applied theory. So trial and error until something works. Just like Mal pointed out, results are what you look for. The best way to do that is just brute force iteration. Whenever a student would ask me, what do you think? I say, try it and see if it works.
Right,
Some
exactly.
of them are creative enough that I've been humbled a bit on some of my own inventions. Just get them trying stuff and see what comes out.
No, and that's actually a key, and it's something that I would encourage anybody who's trying to make this kind of stuff work is just try it, just do it, right? I mean, it's daunting, it's scary. Maybe it's going to cost some resources, but you're never going to know if something succeeds without at least trying it first. But this is something that I'm committed to personally. I'm going to try and make this particular project work because it seems like it's the most promising out of all of them. And as far as wood sources, I mean, we've got a lot of saplings that are we got a lot of saplings from the. Oh my god! Oh my gosh! This stupid freaking phone. Sorry. So we got a lot of saplings from the property that we're doing the syntropic farming stuff with, and we can probably use that to because otherwise it'd just be waste. And around my own house too. So, but yeah. Then the other part was, and this is all me. I know that there's certain plants now in New Jersey. I think I have to get a special permit to I forget what it's called, something Donax. It's the great reed, and apparently that stuff grows like 8 inches a day. It sequesters so much carbon that it actually sequesters more carbon into the ground than if you were to cut off pieces of it and burn it. And if you pelletize it, it has the same energy potential for as coal, right? So
Sounds like
that was the other thing I was thinking. Yeah. So the other thing that I was thinking is they got those old, and you were telling me about this, the old FEMA coal-fired generators.
Well, the old FEMA wood gasifier. It's basically
gasifier.
Making butane from wood gas, but it's an ugly system because it can produce carbon monoxide. It requires manually dumping the ashes. There are some commercial systems out there, but for the most part, pellet stoves and pellet generators are a little bit more popular just because they're a bit more compact and a lot of them have automated ash removal and other features.
Well, the ash part is something that we're not trying to remove it. Believe it or not, it's a great source of potassium and it's used in our composting for.
By ash removal, I mean like removing it from the generator device.
Oh, I see.
Otherwise, it can clog up and extinguish your fire.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So this is you're hearing it right now. This is stuff that we don't know about. We're still exploring it and whatnot. But the idea is to get to just engineer to try. And like John said, brute force engineer or brute force experiment with whatever you can do. And if we can find and then this is what we're trying to find. an energy source where you don't, where basically you're not paying for the grids. Look, I know, even in the smaller houses, I've seen, I've talked to neighbors, right, who have, $400, $500 electricity bills, and we're not talking anything like, we're not even talking like a 2,000 or above square foot house. We're talking, smaller houses like 1,500 to, even 1,200, square feet. That's insane, and data centers are freaking killing us with that. Now, imagine you have to do not just a household's worth of electricity, but also a workshop's worth of electricity because you're running, a small farm. I mean, this stuff adds up, and that's one of the reasons why power generation is one of our parties and our chapters' major concerns and major things that we're looking at. But anyway, so we don't know where we're going with that, but we're hoping to make some breakthroughs. And now
there also are ways of generating electricity from ambient humidity. We've discussed this. It's called hydro.
Yeah. You've got hydro. Now tell us about hydro, because we've been seeing this for a year now. And I know that you said you can create these things that, and it's just I'll let you explain it. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, the basic way that works is think of a sort of solar panel or humidity for humidity. It works by converting water vapor into a small amount of static electricity, because there's certain molecular chains that act like capacitor plates. Water is a nice polar molecule because we get the positive hydrogen, the negative oxygen, and when it passes through these hydroelectric cells, some of the currents will travel and it can be harvested. Now, the issue we have right now is consistency across production, because it's still handmade as a glorified arts and crafts project. Scaling up production will essentially depend on improving consistency and output. There are some promising steps I don't want to spoil, but overall, the problem is essentially the same as we would probably have with making our own material of any type: consistency and quality control with manufacture.
Yeah, no, I tried to help out with that earlier on in earlier stages, but I think it was a PCM board or PCB. I'm sorry. Yeah, PCB that we were trying to get sourced, and we never got. There was no timely response with some of the manufacturers that we were trying to get to do it, and then of course, if you use American manufacturers, they're you're taking a risk. American manufacturers either steal your freaking tech or they'll charge you arm and a leg. So you try to get it out, sourced out from.
Yeah, you walk away empty-handed too.
Yeah, right. So we try to source it from other places, and it was didn't get enough. Didn't get much responses, and we also have to work on designing those things. And unfortunately, at the moment, I don't think we have the people to do that yet. But we're working on it. But in the meantime, that thing already, even in its I would say unimproved or not sexy, because it's in its raw form, it's sort of a few plates with gel in between them and everything. Look, they can charge a cell phone, right? So I mean, the tech works. We just gotta put it in the right packaging and whatnot. But in any case, so there's the hydro stuff. Oh, that's great for emergency equipment too, right? I mean, like you're say you're out on like a long freaking trip, in the middle of Texas. You're like 100 miles away from one town and 100 miles away from the other town because you're on one of them roads, and car dies. You got your freaking phone's dead. And this thing, from what I hear, can even pick up ambient humidity from whatever, so even in a dry place, it will still slow charge a cell phone.
Yeah, I hate to hang anyone out to dry, but overall, hydroelectricity is actually based on a lot of technologies that have been around for a long time. Now, essentially, you're taking the same concept as electric humidity detectors from the 1930s and just applying it on a scaled up level.
See, and again, this is all stuff that can benefit people, and that we're working on. Now, there's another thing, and we just learned about this today. You were the one that brought it up to us, and it's pretty freaking amazing. You've got like there's basically this Kevlar, right? These it's very thin lining and whatnot. And I think what we came up with is if we could actually weave this, or as like either a liner, or we can weave it into some actual tactical gear, especially in combination with your aerogel thing, the that's impact resistant. And now you've got clothing looks just like this. You wouldn't even be able to tell, and you've got some actual armor.
Well, with Kevlar, that's a material that's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, this is not an invention. This is just we found that we could do it.
Yeah, it's something that can be done quite literally with home arts and crafts, shall we say. The issue is, again, going to be assembling and scaling for consistency and quality control.
Now,
parts are already available.
So now in the mad science vein, and this is where I know absolutely nothing, because we're just talking about projects and things that that we have on deck and we intend and that you've been working on. But this one I am completely I have no idea. I am like amateur at best, chemical engineer. So this is beyond me. Mushrooms. Tell us about the mushrooms.
Well, I have to be a fun guy, that's for sure. But keep in mind, the certain fungi act like neurons, nerve cells, and they have electrochemical spikes that they use to communicate across the organism with. This has actually been known since the 1970s, but there's a guy in the UK, Adrian Adamansky, who basically first adapted it for electronics. Some of my research earlier was on using a common type of food mushroom as a memristor, a kind of analog computing device. Very simple example, and found it compared favorably to early silicon transistors and electronics. Now, it uses far less energy, is flexible, but it's also a lot slower. So basically, drying out the organism can preserve it. We don't yet know for how long, but overall, that technology is patented by the university I once worked for. But there are a lot of interests in fungal computing and fungal devices because you don't need rare earths to use them or grow them.
So, what kind of stuff have you been able to What kind of stuff have you been able to run on I guess mushroom or fungal circuit board?
Well, a very simple voltage comparison circuit. That was what we did for the research paper in question. But it's going to be a while before you can run Doom on a mushroom.
But that is the goal.
Yep. There's also fundamental limits to fungal computing because regular silicon devices are limited by something called Moore's law. Essentially, every two years, the number of chips on a certain wafer can double just because they get better at miniaturizing how they etch it with certain types of lasers. That was part of the recent tech war between the US and China over semiconductor design. But one thing to keep in mind is that the current state of the art is in nanometers for silicon because we've had a lot of money going into it. But biology has fundamental limitations compared with silicon and non-animate materials because you can only go down to a few micrometers because of the diameter of the fungal fibers, the hyphae and the mycelium, whereas that's 1,000 times larger than silicon devices are, or even regular non-biological materials. But it does have its use cases, like maybe for radiation sensing or aerospace or wearable electronics of various types. Because my original application was as a model for brain circuits to test out brain modulation devices, electrical stimulation, as well as modeling neural circuits that might have had damage, like someone who has epilepsy, a way of modeling that in analog computing, as well as better wearable devices in general.
Wow. I went over my head. I'm not gonna lie. But okay, so it can have like all right. I'm just trying to think. So it's not gonna be able to run. You're not gonna run crypto, freaking
No.
operation off of mushrooms. But like what like small process, like like subroutines, or like what is the. Oh, okay. I know what the use case is. The use case is anything that needs lower,
Lower energy, or essentially physical flexibility, or maybe radiation resistant, because the mushroom in question is one that is growing in Fukushima in Japan near the reactor disaster from a decade ago.
Okay. So like this would be good for if you need radiation resistant, circuitry in space.
Yeah. So for satellites, aircraft, stuff along those lines.
Okay, so I'm going to switch, gears here. Tell us about some of your like mad science, like some of your most interesting and super freaking fun projects that you've done.
Well, I'll go get one right now.
The man's
device
got
right here was one called the Lachesis line launcher. Now, in older times, a line launcher or a line gun or a line thrower was a device used by sailors to rescue crew members that get swept overboard. I tried making a space version. So my basic idea was essentially, instead of using gunpowder to throw something, or a rocket in the conventional sense, or not modern systems also use pneumatic or crossbows or slingshots for things like oil tankers where you don't want sparks. I wanted one that could be held by an astronaut or a space traveler. So larger trigger guard for essentially a helmet, a large heavy gloved hand, but also something from Nerf, where it was basically using a string pulled taut at an angle, a Captain Slug style scar or a scar barrel with a small Nerf dart with a rocket and 3D printed rocket engine inside. This was the device ended up having less kinetic energy than a Nerf dart. It was put in a dart so it doesn't damage components if you're trying to do orbital rendezvous, orbital debris capture, or orbital rescue. It uses a system where you push the button and it completes the circuit with a laser diode. But of course, the system was very janky, unreliable, because it's a proof of concept. But you might say that a line launcher or space rescue device could be out of this world.
Basically, so it's recoilless.
Well, because in the sense that it doesn't have recoil, just like the old 1960s gyrojet pistol would, right? The projectile is rocket powered. It doesn't have recoil because a firearm, a conventional one in outer space, is basically an improvised thruster because the recoil drives you backwards.
Yes. Okay, so this wouldn't do that. It basically launches, and then the I guess the Nerf dart or whatever has like you said miniaturized 3D printed rocket thing. So it would
this is just a proof of concept of the idea, right? Gotcha. Essentially, just using a line pulled taut with a simple rocket launch system. It's basically less thrust than a model rocket would have, even the lowest commercially available ones. So it's basically less powerful than a regular Nerf system would. So it basically was tested to make sure that the system as a concept can work. So it ended up in a lower tier research journal, but essentially an important proof of concept for a lot of essentially applied theory about rocketry. Just the good old rocket equation applied in a do-it-yourself form. But either way, that system was a kind of a one-off, just a passion or hobbyist project. So rockets have always had an interest to me because I've always found them really out there, you could say they're out of this world, but I don't want anyone to space out over some of the math involved.
All right. There is one that you did tell me about today earlier, and I am actually thoroughly impressed with it. And maybe I thought, all right. So it's the aerogel that actually can work as can levitate.
Well, this is not something I've worked on physically, but
Okay.
I had some students try and replicate a paper. The original paper was by a Japanese researcher from the University of Nagoya. He found that when a certain aerogel made out of carbon nanotubes and some very high purity nanocellulose, essentially another carbohydrate, when combusted and then this material was heated, it would basically act like a kind of mini hot air balloon. So when it's heated, each of the porous cells in the structure acts like a mini hot air balloon, and it's able to levitate. Theoretically, you could put on a solar or similar thing and a wire heater and keep it aloft almost indefinitely. But either way, the material we were unable to successfully and reliably replicate that paper. But I did see this done by the professor himself. So keep in mind that the bourgeoisie control the patent on this one. So it is there are similar materials that could be developed, but again, this is a fundamental research applied science project.
But so say, and mind you, this is what if, I'm just riffing here, but say we were to develop, a relatively well, I would say it's never inexpensive. All science is at least somewhat expensive. But say we were to develop this with another, formula, right? So we would replicate similar structures and get. Would we be able to? Because this is my idea, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But maybe the lightweight miniaturized solar, because you were saying this, so you could keep this thing up there indefinitely. What about making a very large, a platform of this stuff, right, where it levitates and you put a whole bunch of solar on, like those miniaturized solar generation?
That could also be done with essentially something called a solar hot air balloon. That's actually been developed since the 70s. A lot of times the landing is the fun part because it's designed to be a one-off weather balloon and just have a sensor package that would be picked up by a ground crew later on. But overall, something like that with a tether and a cable, or even as a way of broadcasting power down, because one of the problems with solar is that more atmosphere means more scattering, so you lose less power. That's why solar panels are much more efficient in space. If you're able, depending on the local laws about weather balloons, altitude, and putting things up there, keep in mind that even hobbyist researchers can afford weather balloons. They're a couple $100. So having something like this, and then having flexible solar cells and some kind of power broadcast system, because you'd also have the FCC to worry about and get all the approvals for the power broadcasting. Now, of course, tethers and stuff, you have aerospace regulations, state, local, all the rest. But in theory, you could build a giant fleet of solar balloons or solar mini zeppelins, for lack of a better term, and broadcast power to ground stations. You still need a receiver system, but again, you need a fleet of these things to generate substantial amounts of power. But having it in the higher atmosphere potentially improves the efficiency of solar collection, even to the point of where broadcasting power from above is more efficient than having a generator on the Earth.
See? All right. So what I'm hearing is we are in the process. Really, we're at the early stages, the very beginning of starting
Ideation.
A red alert style Soviet mad science project. I absolutely love that particular idea. I hope to God we were able to make that work. I know China recently. I guess they started this project. I don't know if it's already up or it's already finished, but they were putting a massive. I think it was almost like a
space station. They're doing an actual space station and not just a janky
power collection. Yeah, and it's I guess it beams the energy down.
Yep.
Right. We are so far behind, but at the very least, if we can do small scale practical solutions, even if it seems weird or out there or whatnot. I mean, there's so many things that and you're like you're saying, you get a lot of the stuff from, you get a lot of the patents and all the, or even just from older patents, things that have been pushed aside, things that have been sort of siloed or hidden away. There's like a bunch of technology that we've actually has been in existence, and we've just not been told about it, or it's been or the regulations make it impossible to implement simply because it's not on the right. Okay, so I was watching this thing where, and I know it's not geothermal, but it's thermal. Where
it's pretty hot, I know.
But it's super old. I mean, it's one of the oldest freaking ways that people were using to, I guess, heat their houses or whatnot. Is especially in like the frigid, like ultra frigid climate zones. They'd run a pipe like 200 meters out. It would be open with like a top to protect to keep water from getting into it, and then it would run a clay pipe all the 200 meters, and then up into through the floorboards of the house, and at sub-zero temperatures, that the air that would be pushed through that 200 meters, the clay would because it was 4 feet buried, 4 feet under, so it would heat up to, the air would heat up to about like 50, 55, 54 degrees, Fahrenheit. And that airflow would come into the house, and they would have to burn far less, wood to keep their houses warm. And we're talking sub-zero temperatures, and they're using like a quarter of a cord of wood instead of 2 cords of wood, just to heat for the same amount of heat. I mean, this is like old tech. Old tech is honestly works better than the current system. And I hate to make this about HVAC and stuff like that, but one of the biggest freaking scams in existence is tethering us to requiring the kind of insulation that is in our construction materials, the kind of the R rating values,
fiberglass and other stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So all of this stuff is basically forces you, because you either have to run heat all the time or run air conditioning all the time, which tethers you to the grid, which forces you to consume extra energy that you otherwise wouldn't have to if we just went back to some of the oldest freaking technologies in existence.
Yeah. Well, to circle back to this earlier invention right here, this is just an inert paperweight at this point, because all the functional components are basically removed, and it's basically just a trophy on my mad prototypes case. It technically would be akin to the old rocket pistol apparatus, I think that the name that the Brits used in the early 1900s. So it was actually a point where stuff like this would have been carried by insurance on every ship that the British insured it, which was kind of the dominant source of maritime insurance up until a few years ago, with some of the sanctions they threw on the Russians and everyone else after the Ukraine war started more kinetically in 2022. But overall, like a lot of the Chinese, even the Indians and Singaporeans have their own maritime insurance. And as a result, they still have regulations they require a line thrower on, but the range of devices expanded. But getting on to suppressed technologies, look up the Invention Secrecy Act here in the States. But as far as some secret technologies or stuff that might have been suppressed, here's a list of interesting technologies from communist countries from the mid-20th century onwards, if you guys are interested.
Yes, please. Lay it on.
I was actually going to ask a question about that in one of the questions I had. So, yeah, excellent.
So this one actually goes back to technically not a country, but a founding member of a country. This actually goes back to DPRK, North Korea. Before there was a North Korea, there was a type of nylon-like synthetic fiber, vinolin, that was invented by a guy named Dr. Rhee in the late 30s, but he defected to Korea, North Korea, DPRK, after independence. it kind of became known as like a North Korea's national fiber and could be made from locally available coal and limestone without needing petroleum. So that's one.
But what is it? What is it? Because I don't know what that fiber is, and like, well, why is it useful?
Well, because it's made out of local materials instead of needing petroleum-based synthetic fibers.
Oh, I see. So they use it in clothing?
Yeah, it could be used for everything that we use nylon or similar fibers for. Clothing,
right.
industrial fibers, coatings, stuff like that. Another example could be this is actually the first theory of holograms in Hungary in the late 1940s. So that one was the Denis Gabor. The guy who made it was also named for a lot of different mathematical procedures, like the Gabor filter used in compression of data, and a lot of his work got him a Nobel Prize. Now, if we want to go a little bit outside, I know everyone knows Sputnik in the 50s, but during the 50s, the Soviets also had the tokamak, a kind of early fusion reactor that's kind of one of the states of the art right now, compared and contrasted with the Stellarator. But in the 1950s, we also have some interesting stuff from China, believe it or not. We have Qian Shuisun, a guy who co-founded the Jet Propulsion Lab with Jack Parsons, the weird occultist guy. He got deported from the U.S. during McCarthy, and he ended up being the father of the Chinese rocket and space program, as well as missiles. But he was actually very into the idea of revisiting old traditional Chinese medicine with modern technology, something I'll be happy to go into a bit later, like what we would consider a lot of the brain-computer interface or biometric wearables back before it was popular in the West. And likewise, in the 70s, or rather in the 60s, there was an idea called photobiomodulation in communist Hungary at the time. This is the idea that kind of proven that infrared light can improve health as well as metabolism and even cognitively improve performance. Photobiomodulation, especially in the infrared range, is actually a well-cited area in neuromodulation, that is brain stimulation, even without needing any type of invasive or surgical implants. It's very illuminating.
So it's not well, I mean, okay, so is this easy to produce? Is this something
Yep.
Can you
LED
make me one?
Yep. There actually is red light therapy that's widely known, and this is kind of the precursor to it. So photobiomodulation, one recent paper that's been overlooked is that photobiomodulation actually can modulate heart rate by using LEDs positioned on the right part of the arm. So a lot of the implications of that, sadly underexplored, but overall, photobiomodulation is a big one. But there also are some other ones. Like, I know everyone talks about hypersonic missiles. The first hypersonic missile was actually deployed in the 90s by India. They hired former Soviet scientists because it was cheap at the time. They had a mini arms race with Pakistan, who had just developed their first nuke at the time. So that was one that was based on old Soviet research directly. But even before hypersonics, there was something that could achieve very fast speeds, but underwater. That was the supercavitating torpedo, the Squall, that the Soviets developed in the 60s, 70s, I think. That one used a small pocket of gas to activate a rocket engine underwater, so it didn't have the drag. The Chinese in 2014, 2015 reported development of a submarine that could reach San Francisco to Shanghai in 2 hours or so. They never built a full-size watercraft, but based on simulations and models. So they the problem with the Squall, the Soviet, is that it was limited by the capacity of the compressed gas tank in the warhead, whereas the Chinese kind of have a more self-contained system using a kind of gel that works around the problems of the old Soviet model.
Damn! So I didn't know they had two. Wait, so a sub that can go from Shanghai to San Francisco in 2 hours?
Yeah, look up the supercavitating sub from the mid 2010s. They never, to my knowledge, they never built a full scale model. It was based on simulations and thing, but potentially they could. There also was
maybe they already did. Of course, we would never know because that would all be classified stuff.
Yeah,
but that's crazy to think of.
There also is this is more on the medical field, but in the Soviets in the 50s, they developed tetracycline, the antibiotic So
Right,
it's still a staple of global medicine, even in the antibiotic-resistant germ era. But other things that the Chinese developed, there was the first quantum satellite in the 2010s, essentially quantum-enabled that couldn't be hacked for a video call. And even in the 1970s, they had a kind of hybrid rice that eradicated large-scale famine in the country and fed millions worldwide. And a year earlier, they had a kind of low-cost malaria treatment that earned a researcher the Nobel Prize.
So, is there anything that we can? So here's my question. So, because I've been doing this too, I've been looking into a lot of the just unused or siloed patents and technologies and things that a lot of them are patent expired too. But yeah, to try and figure out solutions for because we're all bringing this back to the science itself is actually applied theory, because you have to apply, like, the engineering is all applied theory, as you said. You have to apply the science to physical solutions for particular issues and problems. But yeah, like I've been looking into even stuff that's repurposed, right? So the original idea of the syntropic farming, right, was not even a farm. It was just trying to because there was a lot of logging, a lot of deforestation in the Amazon, right? So the rainforest, and this guy Ernst Gutsch, he created or he basically observed the forest line, and he invented a way to restore via mimicking that forest line ecosystem and how it was the most diverse and would actually creep and continue to create the diverse, flora, fauna, everything. So, and then he ended up finding a way to restore even the full-on complexity where they thought the land was completely ruined, restore the rainforest and slow creep that out. And then, of course, you take that science and you apply it to, okay, what if you made it circular, right, and self-contained, and then you just used it to, boost the soil quality, and boost the harvest capacity. And it turns out it's, it has been done in a few cases, and it has, returned about 400%, of harvest yield and stuff like that. So it's all this science that, it already exists. You can already use it. And you just have to and all it requires is just having the idea of what else can this be used for, which is one of the things that we do around here. And it's an engineering mindset, but it's also a communist mindset, because communists are looking for specifically anything that's going to benefit society in a way that is replicable and easy, mass producible, easy to be done. Because the idea is to sort of end the reliance, because right now it's like we're on an IV drip that the IV drip is basically the substitute for water, right? Like the grid right now, everything is designed for us to continuously be dependent on, be addicted to the grid, and not have any solutions. In fact, most of the solutions to generate our own power, which we can do. Some of the stuff is like as easy as just in your backyard. You can just take some devices and put them together, and you have energy that, or you have water, or you have heat, or you have and it's stuff that is either been memory holds, which you can still do and it's legal, or it's stuff that they've basically removed from regulations, or et cetera, et cetera. They create loopholes. They delete these things because the system itself is designed, once again, to keep you on that power grid, and then keep you consuming the most amount of power you possibly can. In fact, I'm sorry. This is something that I remembered. So I heard the Chinese, in the data centers. So remember I was talking about those thermal banks or the thermal batteries.
Yep.
So in their data centers, they've been using those thermal banks so when that heat exhaust, right, comes out of these, because they generate an astronomical amount of heat, these data centers. So they actually channel all of that heat into these thermal banks, which then help restore, convert that energy or that heat energy into electrical energy that circulates back into the system and basically eliminates a significant portion of the amount of water use that they have to use.
Well, that's one reason. Another one is because they treat their data centers as kind of a public utility. They generate twice as much power as the USA does. So the Chinese basically have the advantages of scaling far more than our janky Victorian era grid.
And I'm sorry, but here's the thing: we know that. Like the freaking people who are making these data centers, like we know about this technology. We know about the thermal banks that we could be putting on the edge of this. We know that it could save us a ridiculous amount of water instead, and pollute less of it. And instead, they're literally building it without those things so that it can consume as much water, so it can freaking drive our, not just drive our prices up, but increase our water, the price of our water, and water treatment, etc. And they don't care. They just don't care. Whereas the Chinese are at the very least mitigating the damage that these things do. We're building them to do damage. Like our data centers are built to do damage. It's the difference between an ML approach and the capitalist approach. But go ahead, Jake. I'm sorry.
You and I have had an interview before on Report Back and Debrief, which will be is being released currently on this channel. And we talked about how you came to Marxism and how you came into the scientific community. But I would like to ask, because you've worked all over the world, you've spoken to scientists all over the world. On an institutional level, how do you feel like a scientific community differs outside the Western world from inside the Western world?
Sure. Well, sadly, a lot of scientists are still educated in the West. Up until the case, that is still very much the case in China, because their top students are often those who pass the Gaokao, kind of like an exam they take at the end of high school, and go free ride through their own domestic universities like C9, Tsinghua, Shanghai Jiaotong University. A lot of those that are still seeking education might go abroad. Like Chinese students in particular are a well sought after market by for-profit education schools, let's just say. And many of them do not study STEM. Of course, there are exceptions. There are still good schools that many competent Chinese students go to, or as well as many students from abroad, like Vietnamese, South Korean, and so on. But overall, like, the way the Chinese organize their system is actually a hybrid of American and kind of the old Soviet style. The way the Soviets would do it is essentially, you don't have to compete for grants like the American one, but you would have a very specialized topic and you would just specialize in the topic, kind of compartmentalize. Like you work on silicon semiconductor devices and almost nothing else. The American system is very diffuse in terms of its funding sources, like grants and foundations, finance, and all these agencies. But it often still rewards specialization. The Chinese system is kind of a hybrid of the two, where it's like they often will have the government directives that get disproportionate sources of funding. That changes every few years with their 5-year plans. But overall, they still have a grant-like system and essentially career security for academics, unlike the chasing tenure track like you do in the States. So that's kind of the three economic things. The Russians still do it the Soviet way to a point, but a lot of U.S. researchers waste more time chasing grant funding and writing grant applications than they actually do on research.
Wild, yeah. That's the same with nonprofit community, to be honest. So I think the next question I have for you is, how has Marxism, Leninism affected your outlook on science and how you practice?
Oh, it seems like a continuation of it. Trial and error till shit works.
And just not much of a distinction, really. I would say.
Well, I like to point out that I think it's Mao himself who said that to scientists and engineers, dialectical materialism is almost instinctive.
Yeah, no,
Keep in mind that engineering used to be a trade before it was a profession.
And from what I've heard, Karl Marx read about chemical engineering and used that to write Capital.
Yeah, quite a reaction. You could say he's based.
He could. He definitely could.
Polarizing point, I know.
So my next question would be like, what are some? And you mentioned this. Some of the advancements that communist countries have made that Westerns aren't even aware of. But I guess what got you interested in politics in the first place?
Well, watching the scramble for funding, I've always been interested in politics when I was younger, how things have changed over time. And when the same worthless political party is run by the Epstein class keep doing the same stuff regardless of who wins, I'm like, wait a minute, there's something fishy going on around here. And I also traveled and lived abroad when I was younger. I backpacked around the world, seeing other civilizational logic at play, how other countries did things, the reasons they did that, understanding that, like, hey, wait, the way we do things is rather inefficient. Why is that? And kind of going down that rabbit hole.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think I have one more question. Other than the last question, the outro question. So you write science fiction, and you publish science fiction. You're very into science fiction. Can you talk a little bit about that? Who are your favorite authors and the stuff you've written? And
sure, I can give you. Well, I'm hoping to launch my own small science fiction press in the not too distant future without spoiling much. But some of my favorite influences, I like the golden age of sci-fi writers like Asimov, Clarke, Heinlein, at least in the West. Before then, I like the classic pulp writers, like even fantasy like Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, the guy who indirectly inspired Twilight Zone with his twist endings, and of course H.P. Lovecraft. He had some unpleasant views, but towards the end of his life, he was very much an American socialist. But abroad, there's also the Strugatsky brothers in the Soviet Union. They started off very optimistic because they were born kind of right after Stalin, and they kind of become a bit more cynical just as the Soviet Union kind of stagnated economically. Yeah. So that's why, like, early on, it's utopian. Like the Noon universe is their main setting. Like the Problem with Being a God was one of their more famous works. And towards the end, they were writing just kind of escapist stuff, like the Roadside Picnic, which was immortalized as the Stalker video games in the early 2000s. Now, if we go over to a place where science fiction is bustling, we can look at the Three Body Problem by Liu Shueisen. Liu Cixin. He wrote Three Body Problem, Wandering Earth, which is made into a really good series of sci-fi movies. So that is kind of the standard bearer for Chinese sci-fi. He is like a golden age style sci-fi writer, like Asimov or Clarke. There's plenty of other writers, of course, but those are some of the big ones.
Yeah, those are
by Frank Herbert. One project I didn't mention was a wearable device that can detect an incoming projectile and then deflect it using a kind of a Kevlar parachute, like a ballistic airbag.
Oh, nice.
Now I do have one, because I before we get to the last question, I do have one thing that I forgot to front load. It was one of the things that I really wanted to discuss, or at least have you explain. Is
I had a follow up to that one. If I can do that. But you've written your own science fiction as well. Is that correct? Can you tell us like a little bit about maybe some of the themes in that?
Sure. A lot of times I like to write across genres. I've written sword and sorcery in the Conan style, like Robert E. Howard. I've written a crappy cyberpunk novel in grad school. I've written an Indiana Jones style 1930s adventure story. I've also written a space opera that's like kind of my take on a setting where melee combat dominates, kind of like Dune meets Star Wars, only hopefully based in ML, as well as a setting that I'm doing right now. It's like my take on a James Bond type spy-fi meets The Expanse, like hard science fiction.
I love The Expanse. Wade, go ahead, brother. Yeah.
Sorry about interrupting. But I did. So you have you're part of this group of scientists that are basically trying to prevent a lot of the memory holding and a lot of the patent gatekeeping and stuff like that. It's the Ronin something or other. Tell us about it.
Sure.
Let us know.
The Institute is more just a nonprofit. It's not political explicitly. So basically, the goal of the organization was originally to act as an alternative for or an affiliation, something that's often sought after in academia for retirees who still like doing research, or people who work part-time or full-time and still like doing research on the side. Like my space line launcher system was a paper published under that affiliation. No relation to my day job, my old biomedical engineering stuff. But overall, that's the value of stuff like that. Now, a lot of times it's basically just glorified DIY projects, a blend of things. It's not very much a well-suited organization for any kind of politics or even patents. There's not a lot of STEM people, not a lot of people who do the practical side of applied theory. There's people who do some really cool physics or really cool data analytics and machine learning, or as well as social sciences and some historians. I do have a few groups I am affiliated with there, or at least good friends of mine in the more applied side, but overall, they're the minority of the organization.
And the purpose is just to do research, or is it to? Because I was under the I guess it was under my understanding that it was a way to do research but not have it be gate kept, like to open source it basically.
Well, it is to try and open source as best as possible. But overall, there are many who try to publish in open access journals. Because one thing I try to do is open source a lot of my inventions as an alternative to patenting them, like create open source hardware and software, because that way is essentially the gift economy of the intellectual property, as opposed to, say, trying to patent it. Because my research funded by a university, the university, of course, has say on the patent. But if it's just me doing hobbyist stuff, like some of my stuff I discussed with you earlier, like the line launcher or the hydroelectric stuff, that's stuff that is done on my own expense, and of course stuff that the university is not interested in.
Right on. Now I know it's a dumb question, but it's because, well, at least it's dumb for people in the know. But what is open source? Like, why is open source actually valuable to anyone, to everyone?
Most people think of Linux or Android as open source. That's correct. But overall, it provides a baseline that which other things can build upon. An example of open source hardware in the Cold War in the military sphere was the AK-47 assault rifle. Anyone could make it out of scrap metal, and it was kind of an equalizer for small groups that might otherwise rely on obsolete stuff other way. So a lot of times open source hardware and open source software can act as a kind of an equalizer. The Chinese, for example, open source a lot of their designs. Their patent laws are fundamentally different than ours, but effectively they still have incentives for the inventors. So it's not just open source by default, but open sourcing of American manufacturing, like some of the open source 3D printers and stuff, that's a great marketing strategy because they still have stuff that they keep as services or ways to make money, but they create their own ecosystem, like the old Chinese proverb, if you want wealth, build a road. So developing open source hardware and alternatives is something we can do and something we are doing to various degrees.
Yeah, because again, you go back to a lot of things that are okay. So the difference between open source and not open source, the guy that invented insulin, for example, he just he gave it away for $1, right? I think that's what it was. Because he just so he made it open source. It's a very cheap to make, right? So he made that and until the pharmaceuticals got a hold of it and started gatekeeping it and creating regulations so that they can overcharge for it. This was a very cheap medicine. It saved a lot of lives all at once, period, right? And this is the benefit of open source versus say a heart medication that they're charging because they have the patent on it. They're charging freaking $400 a month, for your, just to stay alive. And that's actually that's a very kind assessment. That'd be conservative because a lot of times it's $1,000, $2,000, dollars. And sure, there's insurance and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, most people can't afford that, and so they end up getting screwed. And I know this is a medical thing, but open source science is quite literally one of the ways that we can make massive breakthroughs for the least cost that benefits everyone.
Yep. I'd also like to point out publishing. The journals that get stuff out, a lot of times they're kept behind a paywall. That's why with some of my hobbyist projects, I would largely go with what's called an open access publisher. Some of them are transparently scams, but it does help get a article out there so people can at least get feedback on it.
Yeah, because the other thing that these patents and all this stuff does is it gatekeeps the ability for, and this is an essential part of science, peer review. Like if you can't peer review something because it's locked up, then you don't even know that it works. And the people that own these things, they can tell you that it works, but they're glorified marketing departments. So this is why certain medications, like there was a heart medication, and this hit me personally hard because my one of my really good friends and roommates back when I was in Florida in college, his mom was on this heart medication for quite a few years, and it turns out the whole damn thing had to be recalled, and because it was causing stroke. Problem is, it got recalled 3 months after she had her massive stroke. She ended up in the locked-in body syndrome, and for years, her dad, but his dad had to basically take off work. He devoted husband, absolutely, wonderful man. He's never left her side. He no pulling the plug, none of that. He just for the hope that one day she started to, which is great, by the way. It was good news and everything. She started to be able to communicate, but basically through eye movements. And this is the kind of stuff this poor woman.
It's good optics.
Oh Jesus. But for real though, like this poor woman got destroyed, and all because the science, it wasn't able to be peer reviewed because there was a patent, and and they lied, negligent, it was criminal negligence. It was what Engels would call social murder, right?
Well, I'd also like to point.
And by the way, that's I'm sorry.
So
it's just one of the reasons why people have a lot of skepticism, in our medical system. You want to know what the structural reason is? The structural reason is that none of this stuff is open source, so none of it can be peer reviewed. Therefore, none of it can be trusted because our corporations are absolutely freaking.
I'd like to bring up a related topic or a related problem.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the reproducibility or the replication crisis?
No idea.
Basically, a lot of papers published in research cannot be successfully replicated. So I'll give you some numbers. In psychology, it's 50%, so coin flip. In physics, engineering and physics and applied areas actually have the highest replication rates, around 70, 80%. But even then, that's still not very good because sometimes with chemistry, for instance, it may rely on a 20-step reaction where 1 nanogram of something in a side reaction screws up everything downstream. So the stuff that makes it into the top journals like Nature or Science might be very hard, if not impossible, to replicate. But either way, the stuff that does get replicated that's mass producible, that's stuff that might get locked behind a patent or just buried in obscurity because only a handful of people read niche journals that are subtopics of subtopics.
So what you're saying is our science is almost defunct.
Pretty much, in the sense that a lot of it is nearly impossible or hard to replicate. Pharmaceuticals are not very good either, at least in the sense that somewhere between half and 2/3, that's not a very good replication rate. I don't like those odds.
No. Yeah, so I mean, this is the state of science, and this is another thing. It's a long-term project, but it's something that we're going to have to fight to restore. And I do believe, ACP is for the fourth, industrial revolution, so to speak. And I think one of the pillars of that has got to be to restore the actual integrity of the scientific process and the systems and the systems that are necessary. Because to protect the integrity of science, you have to actually protect the integrity of a system. And if the system has no integrity, you don't have any integrity in your science.
Yeah. One kind of interesting thing I'll note is that there's a bit of a contradiction between my background, an engineer, and a scientist. A scientist is focusing on discovering the laws of reality, the physical laws of reality as we know it. An engineer just wants something that freaking works at the end of the day. So
that's what
a lot of what I do is more exploratory engineering than necessarily fundamental basic science, as it's called, right? Basic science might be, okay, I used a space telescope to find a new exoplanet. Or it might be, we found a new biological mechanism for finding a way around to destroy a protein or that is associated with tumors. Whereas an engineer might just be like, okay, what's the best way to get it reliable? Like, how do we improve concrete? How do we get a better insulation for
efficiency, cost, like all the things, or just inventing, right? Okay, so this is the scientific principle. How do I make something that actually, interacts with that? That's useful,
the loop of applied theory, if you will.
Right, exactly. Well, okay, Jay, you got one final question?
Yes. Over the course of this interview, what puns have you developed that you'd like to now impose upon our audience at this juncture?
Well, I found that scientists that collect swords are on the cutting edge. Otherwise, it's kind of dull, and I don't see the point.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's been a wonderful episode. Y'all have a great evening.
How did the lizard weigh itself? Using its scale, of course. How do outer space crews in a relativistic starship dispose of a body? They throw it out the airlock because it's a burial at sea. Heard about the untrained laser technician? Rather dim at the end of the day. Why do mathematicians like walks in the woods? For all the natural logs. Pardon that wooden delivery about the cellulose joke. Have you heard about the scientists that collect swords? On the cutting edge. Otherwise, it's kind of dull, and they don't see the point. Have you heard about Hegel's method applied to find capacitor plates? It's Hegelian dielectrics. Yeah, that was really shocking, I know. I'm sure they get a real charge out of it, but a lot can just get lost in the static.
Yeah. And many are maiden pure and fair. Her love and pride must offer on Mammon's altar in despair to fill the master's coffer. The gold that pays the mighty fleet from tender youth he squeezes, while brawny men must walk the street and face the wintry breezes. Should I ever be a soldier, meet the red flag I would fight. Should the gun I ever shoulder, it's to crush the tyrant's might. Join the army of the toilers, men and women fall in line. Wake slaves of the world, arouse, do your duty for the cause for land and liberty. Yeah. Why do they mount their Gatling gun 1,000 miles from ocean, where hostile fleet could never run? Ain't that a funny notion? If you don't know the reason why, just strike for better wages. And then, my friends, if you don't die, you'll sing this song for ages. Should I ever be a soldier, meet the red flag I would fight. Should the gun I ever shoulder, it's to crush the tyrant's might. Join the army of the toilers, men and women fall in line. Wake slaves of the world, arouse, do your duty for the cause for land and liberty.